Star Wars The Phantom Menace was recently re-released in theaters, which means that the internet was recently treated to another hilarious bout of fanboy belly aching about how Star Wars has been ruined for all of time. Honestly, I don't venomously hate the Star Wars prequels. Granted, I can't stand to watch Episode 2 without a fast-forward button, but the prequels didn't ruin Star Wars for me, and I don't despise them the way other Star Wars fans do. There's really only one aspect of the prequels that's been bugging me ever since they were first released. There are now two completely different Star Wars ships that are both called the V-Wing. In Episode 3 in the Clone Wars series, there's a ship called the V-Wing, which is designed to look like a predecessor to the TIE Fighter. However, long before Episode 3 existed, there was a ship in the video game Star Wars Rogue Squadron that was also called the V-Wing. And Rogue Squadron was one of the Nintendo 64's biggest titles. You wouldn't think that it would be an obscure reference. And the V-Wing in the Rogue Squadron is awesome. It's got overdrive engines, rapid-fire cannons, and cluster missiles, warheads that split into 6 different missiles, each of which seeks out its own target. Oh, you want me to shoot down some TIE bombers? Boom! What TIE bombers? Star Wars Rogue Squadron is another one of my favorite games, even if it is a little old. It's a flying game, a genre that is sadly absent in the market these days, and it's a really dang good one at that. The game involves Luke Skywalker forming an elite squad of pilots to fly high-profile missions for the Rebellion across the galaxy. The game doesn't have much in the way of story, but its story constantly escalates. You start out running simple missions with low stakes, and you end up fighting an entire army of the Empire's forces. The game's controls are excellent, and the game gives you a great variety of ships to fly. There's the balanced-out X-Wing, the heavy-duty Y-Wing, the ludicrously fast A-Wing, the nimble speeder, the aforementioned made-of-awesome V-Wing, the juggernaut Millennium Falcon, and the ridiculously light and nimble TIE Interceptor. The game also has a good variety of missions, alternating between escort missions and blow the everlasting crap out of everything in sight missions. Bottom line, Star Wars Rogue Squadron is a great game, there's no question about it. The sequel to Rogue Squadron, Star Wars Rogue Leader, was one of the launch titles for the Nintendo GameCube, and even though it's a good game, it is far, far inferior to Rogue Squadron. One of the things that made Rogue Squadron so fun was that once you beat most of the levels, you could go back and replay them with different ships that you'd unlocked, and every ship in the game was useful in different ways. The problem that I have with Rogue Leader is that even though you can still replay missions with different ships, most of the ships in Rogue Leader are completely useless. The ships that you can fly in Rogue Leader are the X-Wing, Y-Wing, A-Wing, B-Wing, Millennium Falcon, TIE Fighter, and Slave One. If you use cheat codes, you can also use Darth Vader's TIE Advanced and the Naboo Starfighter. The only ships that are worth a crap are the X-Wing, Y-Wing, and Password Lock ships, because they both have fairly strong shields and all but the TIE Advanced have astromech droids that replenish your health. The A-Wing can only take a few hits before it gets shot down, the TIE Fighter can only take about 2 hits before getting shot down, the B-Wing is slow and for some reason the cannons don't seem to line up correctly with its targeting reticle, the Millennium Falcon is also slow and it doesn't have very good shields, and the Slave One is just pathetic. I will never get over this. The Slave One is as slow as the Y-Wing, and it has shields that are so weak that it can only take a few hits before getting shot down, and the ship's cannons are so low in the ship's body that its guns don't aim properly. It can't fly, it can't shoot, and it can only take a few hits before getting shot down. It's a piece of crap. Sure, the Slave One has cluster missiles, but the cluster missiles are only useful if you can find the homing power-up, and the homing power-up in Rogue Leader is almost impossible to find. And to unlock the Slave One, you have to get silver medals in all of the main missions and 2 of the extra missions. Explain to me how unlocking this heap of dookie is supposed to be a reward? Oh right, because everybody loves Boba Fett. You'd think that one of the most feared bounty hunters in the galaxy would fly around in a ship that isn't a rusty heap of crap. Hell, the Slave One even has its own Easter egg. You see, Rogue Squadron came out shortly before The Phantom Menace hit theaters, and Rogue Leader came out shortly before Attack of the Clones hit theaters. In Rogue Squadron, you can use a password to unlock a Naboo Starfighter, which happens to be the best ship in the game. In Rogue Leader, there's a code to change the paint job on the Slave One to the way that it looked in Episode 2. Really? The first game gets an extra ship, and the second game gets a paint job for a ship that you'll never use. Besides, you always look at the ship when you're flying from behind, and from behind you can't tell the Slave One has a different paint job. Not gonna lie, you kind of phoned it in on that one, LucasArts. Oh, speaking of phoning it in, there are 5 extra unlockable levels in Rogue Leader, and one of them reenacts the asteroid chase from The Empire Strikes Back. All you do is you fly in a straight line, holding down the fire button so that the Millennium Falcon's automatic aiming guns shoot down the TIE Fighters chasing you. If you do anything else or fly even a little off course, you've actually exited the level's map and the game forces you to turn around, which usually crashes you into an asteroid and kills you. The Millennium Falcon sucks in this game too. It's slow and it doesn't have good shields. In Rogue Squadron, the Millennium Falcon was awesome. It had a ton of warheads and it had great shields and... oh balls. I just crashed one of my own ships. In Rogue Squadron, all of the ships were useful, and it was fun experimenting with different ships to play each level. Even though the A-Wing had weaker shields than the other ships, it could still take several hits before getting shot down. Plus, the A-Wing speed allowed you to outrun other ships and avoid lasers. In Rogue Leader, not only do the A-Wing and TIE Fighter take far less punishment before they get shot down, but the enemies in Rogue Leader fire much more accurately, to the point that they just about automatically hit your ship whenever they fire. So the faster ships don't help you for squat. Rogue Squadron also had over half of its levels where you could replay the level with any ship that you wanted. Rogue Leader has 10 basic levels and 5 unlockable levels. Out of those 15 levels, you're allowed to pick any ship that you want in 6 of them. In 2 of those levels, you're sent to take down a Star Destroyer, so picking any ship other than the X-Wing or Y-Wing leaves you screwed. One of the levels forces you to switch ships almost immediately to complete it. And one of those levels is an endurance level, which means you have to select the X-Wing or Y-Wing to stand any chance of surviving. So from a practical standpoint, Rogue Leader only has 2 missions where you can use any ship of your choice. All of those ships that you can unlock, and you'll never use them. And by the way, the endurance level is complete hell. All you do is you fight identical standard enemies that gradually improve in intelligence, and the level ends after you've killed 99 waves of enemies. You're given 6 hours to finish the level for a gold medal. 6 hours! The strategy guide tells you that you should be able to do it in only 3 hours, but here's a little game design tip. That's still about 2.5 hours too long. And you can't stop the level and come back to it later. You have to beat it in one shot. The game actually expects you to set aside 3 to 6 hours of your day to play one mission. If I do happen to have 3 hours to kill, I'm going to watch Watchmen, not play a repetitive level in a video game, shooting down identical enemies until I start praying that I die of boredom. But that's not even the worst of it. Here's Rogue Leader's crowning achievement of pointless splendor. 2 of the game's extra levels have you fly as Darth Vader. The first of these levels has you shooting down rebels over the Death Star, and it ends with you chasing rebels down the trench. You're given 3 ships to choose from in these missions: the TIE Advanced Prototype, the TIE Fighter, and an Imperial shuttle. I kid you not, it is physically impossible to complete the trench section of the Death Star level in the shuttle. The shuttle is too slow to catch up to the first group of rebels before they reach the exhaust port, which means that you can't beat the level if you're flying the shuttle. It is not possible. That's the perfect example of this game's problem. The game gives you unlockables and prizes that you either can't use or you won't use. I don't know, I suppose that Rogue Leader is meant to be a more realistic depiction of Star Wars. Of course the ships with weaker shields get shot down quickly. Of course the enemies can hit the broadside of a barn. Of course flying a cargo ship into combat is a bad idea. But here's the thing. Realism is not the most important thing in a video game. I just want the game to be fun. Useless ships do not make a fun game, and Rogue Squadron understood that. Even though I really like the game, there is one level in Rogue Squadron that was the absolute height of frustration: Escape from Fest. The premise of the mission is that a small group of rebel commandos has stolen a squad of ATPTs, all-terrain personal transports, from an Imperial base, and you have to escort them to safety. ATPTs are so weak that you could blow on one and it would explode. If you let any of the enemies get a single shot off at any of the ATPTs, you pretty much immediately fail the mission. If you screw up bringing down a single AT-AT, and believe me, there's a lot of them in this level and it's easy to screw up bringing one down, then you've already wasted too much time and you fail the mission. I just don't understand why the commandos decided to steal these AT-PTs in the first place. The mission's briefing indicates that the commandos infiltrated the Imperial installation for the sole purpose of stealing the AT-PTs. What could the Rebel Alliance possibly do with 3 fragile walkers with practically 0 offensive or defensive capabilities? And while you're taking down the AT-ATs, the AT-PTs keep marching directly towards the enemy fire. You wouldn't think it would be too much to ask for trained commandos to not march into enemy fire in ships that are constructed of cardboard. I don't mean to fixate on this, I'm just trying to think of a rational reason why I have to escort 3 tiny ships that die in one hit. But as hard as Rogue Squadron is, the difficulty is placated by an infinite lives code that's built into the game. All you have to do is go to the game's password screen and type in "I give up." No, I'm not even kidding about that. Also, if you go to the password screen and type in "chicken," you get to play a demonstration level where you drive an AT-ST blowing the crap out of a ton of enemies. Best Easter egg ever. Oh wait, second best Easter egg ever. There's also a code that turns the V-Wing into a flying car, but if you use it, the game kind of, well, crashes. Even though Rogue Squadron has some hard-as-nuts missions, at least it never forces you to destroy 2 Star Destroyers on your own with a strict and short time limit. Yeah, Rogue Leader wins in the difficulty department. There are 2 levels in Rogue Leader where you have to destroy an entire Star Destroyer, and the damn things are loaded with more guns than you can possibly count. The first time that you have to shoot down a Star Destroyer is in the 5th mission, when you have to save the Razor, a blockade runner that's carrying the plans for the 2nd Death Star. This is another little question that I have with Star Wars. Nobody seems to know how the plans for the 2nd Death Star came into the possession of the Rebel Alliance. Return of the Jedi simply vaguely said, "Many Bothans died to bring us this information." The video game Star Wars TIE Fighter fleshes out this story by dividing an entire campaign to your character chasing Bothans and mass murdering them, but leaving just enough alive so that the rebels get the data. Then Shadows of the Empire came along and said, "Screw that, this asshole who we made up specifically for our story stole the plans all by himself." If I go into ranting about Shadows of the Empire, this video will go on for way too long, but put simply, its story is akin to a bad Mary Sue fanfiction. Rogue Leader's version of the story is that Luke Skywalker worked with some Bothan technicians and put the plans on the Razor, which was captured by the Empire, and now Rogue Squadron has to save it. I admit that's vague, but it also doesn't seem to gel with either of the other versions that have been told in Star Wars. I'm sure there are more versions than that of how the Rebel Alliance got the data, and there's probably some obscure expanded universe explanation, but you know what? Screw the expanded universe! You know that starfighter that Darth Vader flew in the first Star Wars movie? Sources in Star Wars state that ship is a prototype for the TIE Advance, and the video game Star Wars TIE Fighter features the full version of the TIE Advance, but the expanded universe has retconned it so that the computer game's TIE Advance is now called the TIE Avenger, and TIE Advance is an ambiguous term for any prototype TIE Fighter in existence. I know that it's a petty complaint, but Star Wars TIE Fighter is my most favorite video game ever, and it irritates me that they retconned one of the game's primary ships for no reason. I'm starting to ramble. I need to get back to Rogue Leader. The strategy guide for the game recommends using the X-Wing or B-Wing's proton torpedoes to attack the Star Destroyers. The problem is, you can't. If you have the homing proton torpedo upgrade and you try to shoot torpedoes at the Star Destroyer's shield generator, the torpedoes lock onto one of the 5,000 guns instead of the shield generator. This is the only game that I've ever played where powering up your weapons puts you at a disadvantage. To finish off a Star Destroyer, you have to destroy its command deck. Destroying the command deck entails flying over the front of the ship so that every one of its 5,000 cannons can shoot you at once. In the game's 9th level, you have to destroy 2 of the damn things, and you have to do it with a time limit because both of them fly at a mission-critical command ship. Crips, I hate this level! Also, when you fly the shield generator on bottom of the Star Destroyer, the game constantly tries to level your ship with the horizon so that you have to fight the controls to approach the shield generator. It sucks. You don't technically have to destroy the Star Destroyers by yourself. The game gives you 2 wingmen in every level to issue commands to. The problem is that issuing orders to your wingmen is a completely pointless gameplay mechanic. You can give your wingmen one of 3 orders: form up, attack, or retreat. The form and retreat commands don't do squat. The only order that you're ever going to give them is to attack. So why not have them attack enemies on their own without me having to tell them every 5 minutes? You can use your targeting computer to send your wingmen after specific targets, but you need the advanced targeting computer upgrade to do it, and that upgrade is A, hidden in the hard as nuts last level of the game, and B, hard as hell to find without a strategy guide. Also, even if you order your wingmen to destroy a Star Destroyer's guns, having them destroy a few guns out of 50 isn't going to do you any good. So the wingman command system is a completely pointless addition to the game. Now, despite this rambling hate speech that in retrospect doesn't make any coherent sense, Rogue Leader isn't a bad game. It has good controls and there's good variety to its levels. Rogue Leader just has some really annoying design aspects, like 5 of its levels make me want to hang myself. If there is a point to this video, it's that Rogue Leader is vastly inferior to its predecessor. Rogue Squadron gave the player a ton of freedom and a ton of vehicles. Rogue Leader has unlockables too, but its unlockables suck. Rogue Leader copies the Rogue Squadron formula without understanding the point of the Rogue Squadron formula. It's still a good game. The first one was just way better.
Lord Vader, I beg your forgiveness.